Afrogen Pod, the All Africa Students Union podcast on gender advocacy. Today, our topic is the African woman at peace with the global digital revolution? We are privileged to have with us Miss Akosua Manu. You're welcome, madam.
Thank you.
Okay, can you please take us through the digital divide between the African woman and the global woman?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for showing up and good morning, afternoon, evening to whoever is watching. Now, the digital divide, basically, in simple terms, is the gulf or the distance between people and their access to computers or the internet. So, and that's basic definition terms. Now, if we are putting it into context, in Africa, there are challenges. So the challenges will be in terms of technology, geographical issues. So, for instance, even between you and I here, if I was to go to a part up north or even some parts of the eastern region, you'd realize that network connectivity, even for our phones, will be an issue. So, how much more internet usage? Now, what it does though is that statistically, Africa pales in comparison when it comes to the numbers and catching up with what um, largely developed countries are doing. Now, it would be important that um, despite acknowledging what the issues are, we also need to deliberately ensure that we catch up. And what does it mean to catch up? Even as far as technology goes, we have tech so high advanced that even apps can diagnose health challenges now. We've seen chat GPT go viral, and I know some students are using it to do their homework and stuff.
Exactly.
Now, what I would want to see though is that as far as technology goes, we put the systems and structures in place to provide an equal platform for persons living in Africa. When it comes to women, now, if I take the Ghana context, in terms of even businesses and entrepreneurship, women are ranked higher in engaging in entrepreneurship. Imagine complementing that with internet usage and access. And even when it comes to internet usage, the numbers I have, even with mobile phone usage, the stats has 69% of women using as compared to 80% of men. When it comes to internet, it's 46% women and it's 50% men. I know that specific, I would say that some intention has been made in some schools, for example, KNUST, when it comes to STEM and ensuring that girls get even scholarships so that their interest in those the sciences are higher, especially in that space. But yes, I would acknowledge there's a problem. Some steps have been taken, but I think that we have to make sure that we catch up as much as we can.
That's great. You've given us some statistics on women's access to technology and the internet.
Yes.
And so, what would it mean for the African woman to have equal access to the internet and technology?
Okay. Now, when there's equal access, what it means is that there's the lack of know-how is reduced because internet access means information is in the palm of your hand. If you have a device or on a computer, you can just find out certain things without anybody necessarily misinforming you. There is some challenge though where some people tend to believe everything they see on WhatsApp or certain social media platforms. That's a challenge, but typically a person enlightened or exposed to what to look out for and how to source information will do better in finding that for themselves. So providing the African woman that the know-how is important. It translates to motivation for you because you realize that for people have transformed their own economies and their personal economies just by having information. People have educated themselves and started businesses on YouTube. And we saw this even go up when it came to lockdown. There were young people who started food delivery businesses because they realized that look, people are home but they still don't want to cook. So we need to find a way around it. There are people who switch jobs when they realize that there are avenues to actually explore being at home and running businesses online. So the opportunities abound when an equal playing field is guaranteed or there's access. And the thing about African potential is once you open the door, they would run with it.
Okay, great, great, great. So when it comes to the access for females to technology and the internet, what are some of the challenges that African women face?
Okay, so now when it comes to access to technology, there are a couple of things came up.
Okay.
So first of all, high cost of internet. Data is pretty expensive, and averagely, even in terms of you want a pretty high bundle, you realize that it's literally the minimum wage for the month, literally, which is very expensive for young people. So I see some local telcos trying to find ways, flexi bundles and packages to get young people still plugged in and connected, because you can't dismiss the importance of data. According to research on Business Insider Africa, um, Africa still has the highest cost when it comes to data. It does. The most expensive, Equatorial Guinea is listed as one of the most expensive countries where data cost and all that. Now, other challenges also that women get paid more, get paid less as compared to men in some African countries. I wouldn't use Ghana as an example, but the average, for instance, in South Africa, the average South African woman is paid 15 to 17% less than the average male. So Africa as a continent, in terms of making sure that we still compete out there, we're still back, a lot back. Now, social norms. Kenya, for instance, data showed that lots of girls didn't have access to the internet. Gender-based violence, five African countries, Kenya, Uganda, Senegal, South Africa, experience gender-based violence. Young women are just happily just posting pictures online, and predators are tracking them down and abusing them. And this is horrible because domestically we don't have that statistic, and we don't want it to even become a thing. But these are the realities that other African countries face. Based on whatever cultural issues or lapses they have, it needs to be addressed. There's also privacy and trust issues. Some countries, given the religious and cultural backgrounds, is for the men to allow women to have access to the internet. So there's a study where, in as far back as 2015 in Egypt, for women to have access to internet in their own households, they had to ask their partners or their husbands for permission, and it's quite. It seems shocking, but we still had a West African country up to maybe a decade or two ago. You had to ask your husband for permission before you get a passport. So we are making progress, but that progress can be limiting if we do not attach some intensity and speed to it.
Okay. So there needs to be a sense of urgency in
Yes.
attacking these digital
Yes.
issues. Okay, so what is the role of the African woman in the digital economy in terms of leading the way in entrepreneurship and innovation?
Okay. Now, the role often is, especially, so first of all, data supports the fact that when women lead organizations and even tech based organizations, they increase uh, investments or even revenue by 34%. They manage better. Now, what it does is when women are put in certain positions, they allow for other women to also come into the space. And this can be debated, but
Yeah.
even in our local, and I like to use Ghana as an example. I believe it's Guinness Ghana, from top management at the very top of their structure is all women. And when it comes to operational bits, that's when the men have opportunity as well. But it's important to note that women make, you know, I don't want to use a cliche, lemons out of lemonade, but the leadership qualities of women, especially currently in the century, is not to be debated.
Yeah.
The evidence is there. So what women do, and some have created hubs, some have created safe havens for women who have gone into who have suffered abuse, like we've seen in some other countries. We have women who are actually also creating platforms for girls to get into coding. I'll use Regina Jari, Soroka Academy. I even put my own kids through one of the coding classes. And what it does is what it opens people's minds to endless possibilities, and it connects to opportunities through entrepreneurship, because then a young person realizes that, you know what, even if I don't get formally placed in some organization, there's still an avenue for me to create something myself. And also, the more enlightened people are, the more certain issues are reduced in our society, as we all know. So the ability to break free and explore is very possible, especially when women create these spaces. So, and some have taken the lead. There's a young oh, I did the research on her. Her name feels me, but in the tech space, there's in Microsoft. There's a Ghanaian
Yes,
lady, Ivy Bali, and then there's also Angela Tremantin. There's she got appointed recently, and I believe it's Microsoft, and people are doing well. When you take the telcos, they use technology also. It's being run by and large by women, and we've seen the impacts locally for ourselves. So, but there's still a very low. The data is low on women creating tech spaces, and it always comes back to women not getting as much support in financing as men do. Manu have whatever business plan, it might not even hold water, but they will be able to unlock funding for themselves as compared to women. So I believe that if if opportunity is given to women as much as they are when it comes to unlocking resources to start up issues, start up businesses, or start up or create platforms to help others, I believe that we'll see a lot of improvement in this space.
When women are given more opportunities, it will go a long way in creating avenues for them. Thank you. So, how are African women using social media and the internet as a means to raise their voices, to engage in activism, to positively affect not just Ghana but the continent as a whole?
Okay, so the thing about new media, so YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, um, Instagram, advocacy, TikTok. We've seen hashtags start movements around the world. We've seen a hashtag trend so much that security implications were even raised. And this is how people can engineer change. So you'd realize that when people agree there's a consensus on a particular issue and attention is drawn to it, there's a voice, or there's a common voice. Often the challenge becomes who spearheads or becomes the face of that advocacy, and whoever it is, the better positioned or the better choice is made in terms of leadership. More credibility is given to that organization. We've seen one of the, I think, a formidable group that comes to mind is on Facebook. I'll say Tell It All. It started with Tell It Moms, I think. And some of the things they do in terms of advocacy, they educate members, talk about relationships. And there are people who've discovered that certain things that they might think is normal in their own relationships, not necessarily the norm. There are issues that probably were not as comfortable to discuss, but certain groups have brought it to bear and it's become conversations. There are people, there was a whole full blown conversation when a young lady took to social media to talk about sexual assault and molestation when she was in law school, which was for some very ballsy, and for some there were women who were even saying she shouldn't have done that. But the point is, we often always call on the victims to be more mature than the perpetrators, and these are conversations that have to come up and that we need to talk about. So the platforms exist. We need to be careful what we put out there. I have, when I go back into some of my tweets, I've written things I'm like, oh wow, maybe the tone and the language, youthful exuberance, but it's we live and we learn and we constantly evolve, and it's important that, I mean, if you don't grow, you rot. You have to grow, you have to improve. So what can we use these platforms to do is to amplify good works, is to, and I'm big on passionate about volunteerism, because through my life volunteering in one way or another helped to unlock doors for me. And I always encourage young people, when you have the opportunity, maybe you're good at tech, volunteer, use your social media to educate people for free. You never know what it would open up for you. So that modern women have used social media to protest. I remember the most recent one I was watching, I followed through a bit, was a young girl that was literally slain. She was murdered, it is, because she wore her, um, what do you call the baklava or whatever, differently. She was arrested subsequently. This was in, I believe, was it Iran? I may be wrong on the country, but it sparked riots all across the world. That what is it so? Is it so? So wrong for somebody not to wear it well? What does it mean even in the modern age? And these conversations come up because traditions have been followed for years without really questioning why we follow these traditions. But it only takes a spark and a movement ignited by the huge potential of the internet to draw awareness to injustice and inequality and things that marginalize people, especially women. So the internet has birthed a space for a lot of opportunity. It's highlighted a lot of challenges we have. It's created a lot of opportunities positively. But the negatives, I believe that we can use internet technology to harness. And by what we need to do, like I said in the beginning, is to ensure that we are making we are providing opportunity or making sure that technology is accessible. Um, not everybody needs to get an iPhone, but most affordable phone where they can still have their WhatsApps or whatever apps is as important as anything. In Ghana, we have something called a YAM, and that phone, there's no internet. And you still realize that a lot of women have it, and the statistics in Africa is 9 out of 10 people don't have access to internet, which is pretty huge. So there's a lot of work to be done, and the more awareness is created, I believe the better we will be as a people, especially for women.
What is the role of the government and technological companies and stakeholders in general in bridging this digital divide and enabling women to fully participate in this digital revolution?
Okay, so the role of governments and private sector. Governments would, of course, have to provide the infrastructure to enable private sector right on to improve services. So, for instance, internet does exist, but do all your citizens have access? No. Um, you have access to internet, but can you afford it? So, I've you know the most shocking thing I heard somebody say, and that was a couple of years ago, was like, oh, I turn my data off to save costs, which I thought was shocking, but it's actually quite a thing because they are on so many groups and whatnot, and if you're not careful, it runs your data down. But what private sector also can do is to ensure that at least in terms of providing these services, there's some sort of consideration made to reduce the cost of data services just so young um, people and women in particular can have access. So government in terms of infrastructure, government also needs to put the building blocks in place in terms of the rules surrounding new media. One of the things I very it worries me a lot is the language young people use on social media, the insulting tones and whatnot. And ideally, if you can't stand the person's face to say the same things, then you have no business saying it online. But we made it okay, and we need to ask, is it okay? Because even in our homes, we don't tolerate certain types of languages. So why do we do so online? So private sector making sure that in terms of private sector, often the concentration is more business profits than in terms of making sure that there's equality or access. But we are yet to have our own social entrepreneur that is fixated on ensuring that there's equity in the space. But I believe that it's as far as government is concerned, and this current space you're in, yes, we've seen improvements in leaps and bounds, especially with digitalization as spearheaded by our vice president. I mean, the vision has been there; he's been following through on it. We've seen the current Minister of Communications, Esther, from even introducing tech in secondary schools for young girls. It's like a whole project and a drive. I believe that access is being spearheaded, but you need private sector to complement it because we know these things are often resource sapping to ensure that there's spread, there's potential, and we're connecting people to these opportunities. Yes.
So, in conclusion,
Yes.
would you say the African woman is at pace with the global digital revolution?
I would say that overall, generally, the African woman is not, no, is not in sync or at pace, as you would put it, with the overall global economy because our challenges are quite it limits us. So there's the technology issue and access, the geographical issue as well, the lack of know-how. These stare at us in the face, and it limits access even to what phones people buy. And we might be, I'm noticed all of us in the room use iPhones, but it's not the reality across board. Generally, people do not have phones that give them access to internet. And we've seen, and especially in agriculture, in certain countries, especially Kenya, they've used apps to amplify they've made agri actually quite attractive, and in other countries as well. And these opportunities, when properly, when there's some, when we're intentional about it, it would open up the African woman and position her better to create more value and opportunities for others.
Thank you very much, Miss Akosua. It has been a rather insightful and engaging session, and I believe our audience have learned so much from you. Thank you very much for staying
Thank
with
you.
us. Keep in touch on our podcast channel. We'll come up with more engaging podcasts for you, and we are doing a couple of engagements and activities and projects on education, keeping a girl in school, on girls in STEM, and then on sexual and gender-based violence. Thank you very much, and stay tuned with us.